changed my life.
Been very emotional.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. I am Tahi, this is Jacob, and we are Polaris. Today's guest is the founder of Primabolics, Will Davey. How you going?
Thanks for having me,
Big
gentlemen.
clap.
I like that. It's nice having a clap and it's good being interviewed too. Actually, this is a bit of fun. I do a bit of podcasting, and it's nice. I always am interviewing, so it's really nice to be the interviewer.
other side.
It's cool. It's cool. So thanks for having me, gentlemen.
We
I
have,
appreciate it.
you're most welcome. We have on this we have like a soundboard thing where you can do like a clap. It's like woo. Like we've done it before, and we're over here with our headphones on, going, "Yeah, like, this is sick." And other person's over there, like it's just dead silent because they can't hear it.
Yeah,
and they're like,
we're just like, woo.
It's nice to get an in-person clap, gentlemen. I appreciate the situation. That's gold. That's gold.
"How are you, mate?"
Really good, man. Really good.
Good.
Yeah.
It's been a cracker start of the year. Really, really thoroughly excited.
Awesome.
Life's been really cool.
Yeah. I think every time I log onto a social, you're at somewhere speaking something, and you've got your toes in so many pieces of water. It's unreal. Like I remember when we had our conversation. What was it, like a couple of weeks ago now?
Yeah.
Over there, yeah.
Back, yeah.
And like I mentioned it to one. 6 people messaged me like Acacia, Max, Nerida, and they were all just like, "Oh yeah, Will's unreal. We're gonna do this and that and this." I'm like, "Oh yeah,
that's like-
sick."
I put up a thing on my story last night, and it hit so many people liked it. And they're like, "Oh, you're gonna enjoy this one," and I was just like, "What is going on?" I only just heard about him.
That's very humbling. That's unreal, man. I'm very fortunate to have a very good circle of people that I've crossed paths with, and I think a lot of those individuals are really good humans, and I think it's really cool to see, because I think in the fitness industry, much like what you guys are probably discovering, I suppose, that the highest value I find a lot of people is growth, and people really want to improve themselves, and I'm really big on helping people do so. I started this thing to try and impact health on a big scale,
Nice.
and what I thought was big is getting revised constantly, but I think that's really the big ethos, and so the people that you sort of attract when you're in that space, I suppose, it pulls in people who also want to improve and optimize health and try and help others and improve the health of themselves and different spheres of that too. I've always been, though, interestingly enough, this is quite a new space to me. It's the people, the narrators of the world, and good friends of mine that have been very big influences on me in going into more of a self-awareness path, I suppose. That was somewhat neglected historically. I was all about optimizing physical health, right?
Yep.
And how to look at that chemically. How do we if I wanted to in my life, it wasn't about being aware of the maybe past traumas or stored issues or what have you.
Sure.
It was chemical. It was like, what about the adrenaline, the norepinephrine, the cortisol? What about the nervous system, the parasympathetic or sympathetic? What about modulating the nervous system instead? And so I looked at it purely from like the chemistry rather than the mentality angle of it. So,
Now you're able to grace your wisdom and your presence on this realm as well, and how it's probably like the stuff that you've learnt, like you just said, through the physical realm, like relates so much in regards to the mental space and the emotional space, even the spiritual space.
Well, and that's the fascinating thing, is we're all actually talking very similar languages. Yeah. But because none of us often cross paths, like you won't get, I suppose, quite often say, the naturopaths, people in the health space won't often talk to, or maybe the naturopaths do, but I suppose like the health versus fitness is different, right?
Sure.
The industry is, again, much more of a physical industry as well, and we don't often talk, but we're speaking similar language. When you talk about energies, for example, so let's or magnetism and resonance and things that put out, a lot of those can also be, a lot of those like energies and those languages can also be, they're also spoken in our world, again, talking about, but more so it might be from energetically from where your energy comes from. Is it cellular energy? Is it nervous energy from your nervous system again? So I guess it's quite funny. The more I realise where people come from things and what informs what. And I've also found it quite interesting because it's a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario. So if you think about what I've really gotten into since I've now gone purely from the textbook angle, now coming back into, I guess, now seeing it from your side as well, one informs the other and the other informs the other too. So it's this cyclical thing. You can't have, I guess, I spoke to I interviewed a life coach quite a while ago, and he was saying, it was interesting, he was going, if I just will myself into a good headspace, or I will myself and be a motivated person, then that will inform my biology to improve as well. I'll drag my body through to get to a better place. And I went, well, can you really be in an optimal place with mental health or emotional health or what have you if you haven't got the chemistry to allow it though? For example, if you're swimming in a bath of cortisol and stress hormones, if you're low dopamine, so your motivation's low, your drive's low, your satisfaction, your rewards low, if you've got high stress, then testosterone drops in. Man, if you've got low testosterone, can you be expected, again, that lowers drive, lowers motivation, lowers recovery? Can you really be expected to be in a great headspace if you're swimming in a chemical bath of stress and low motivation and low mood? And so I find it really fascinating now I'm feeling really fortunate to have conversations like this, because I love making our two worlds meet and seeing how they interact and seeing how the body can thrive coming at it from both spheres, quite holistically. Yeah.
I think this this podcast is going to be really, really valuable for our listeners, 100%.
Oh, I'm not here to interview. I'm just here to take knowledge.
When we walk up the stairs, I said, "Just strap yourself in. Will's fucking smart." And he's like, "Oh, okay."
I was like, "I'll just sit here and just listen and take it in."
I absolutely adore education, and I think it's something that if I want to try and create impact, I have to. And I suppose I'm a bit old school. I haven't been much of a social media person historically, so I don't have much. I suppose the whole getting my message out has always been done in person.
Sure.
But I'm learning now I can impact more people on a bigger scale doing things like this and higher leverage use of time and so on. But I still absolutely adore just being able to put this information out. We don't own our knowledge, right? We're think of yourself like a library, right? You're the vessel for it. Everything's borrowed, right? So unless you've invented something, you don't own that knowledge, right? So we're only ever people who carry it for a part of time, and then we have to give it to others to help them on their way, right? So you have the obligation to. Because I can remember significantly more than most, it's my obligation then to pass that on to as many people as I can in my time here to make sure I have the most impact and pass on the most. Because passing it down, right? It's how written language worked and what have you. But in this particular setting, I'm thrilled because you guys are I love the movement you guys have been doing and really helping people. Self-awareness wasn't really, especially in the male sphere. I don't know, talking as an all-male podcast right now. Yeah. I don't think it's not an area that we've brushed on a huge amount. Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway,
no, not at all. No, I think we've noticed it's maybe over the last 12 months, it's starting to pick up a little bit, but nowhere to near the level where it needs to be. As you know, as all three of us growing up, I'm sure it never got spoken of. I only just started stepping into the space when I always say to everyone, there's only two reasons why people change. It's either potential seen or pain recognized. They're the only two reasons why someone's going to change. They either feel some type of pain and they want to move through that pain, or they see that they want to become better, so they want to get to that position. They're the only two reasons. So a lot of people will push people being like, you need to change. But until they get to that point of those two things, they won't do it for themselves. But yeah, anyway, so I went through my own growth when I was 22, 23, when a lot of I was recognizing a lot of pain within my life, and that's when I wanted to find out where it was coming from. But yeah, 100%, like you're saying, self-awareness, especially in the male space, is quite dormant. It's starting to pick up, but it's still very, very dormant. 100%.
Dormant's a good word for it. I'd say it's because we're not. I suppose if you look at most of our age groups, and I'm 30 odd now. I suppose my parents born in the 50s. I think it's also a result of what our environments were. It just wasn't a language that men spoke. I grew up on a farm, and my old man grew up on much bigger farms and was a awesome man, very hard man. And so I suppose that was what was taught to them.
Sure.
They grew up through. I mean, if you were born in the 50s, you saw. The Korean War, Vietnam War, 1-2 depressions. You've seen your recessions as well. You've said you've just grown up through hard times. You've had it, and you just had. It was just wasn't their language. There wasn't even a language to put to it. To be aware of.
It's true.
But, so I suppose, but it's interesting because I've had such a tumultuous time getting to where I am now that I've always had probably more than most on their plate, trying to get to where I'm in business life now.
Sure.
And so. It fascinates me that I haven't actually looked at any of this previously, but I think you're right. It has to be people either run towards something or away from something, and I suppose, but it gets to a certain point when you have enough things collapse around you that you eventually just go, okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm listening now.
You got my attention.
Understood.
Understood. So it's fascinating. But it's quite cool now being able to put them both together. And particularly I think lately, I've been really, I suppose before I talk more in on more general topics on how to help people, but I've gotten more specific recently, and I've learned there's actually a really big demand for people to want to have knowledge on how to optimize their health, right? It seems to be really good, which it's great. There's a really big demand for knowledge on how to improve themselves overall. People want to know. Whenever I'm doing talks or seminars or putting up stories or putting up videos and asking people, they really want to know, men and women, and surprisingly, men more so. Because you guys started with men, didn't
Just
you?
men, yeah.
We only just started working with women at the end of October, and that was one of our questions I was going to get to towards the back end. How did you? Because have you been working with men and women at your seminars the whole time?
No, look, it's interesting because I've come from the lens of stress, which is quite ironic now. Look at it. I guess because I was in a uniquely qualified position to talk on stress, given my background. But I suppose if you're in a room of strangers, you've got 100 people in front of you, you don't know anyone from bar of soap. They could all be from different backgrounds, different ages. You've got to be able to find something identifiable, right? And so you might talk about testosterone or estrogen or thyroid function or whatever. All these different hormones are somewhat specific, but I had to try and relate to an entire room of strangers in a different town, different state, and find some common ground that I could that it would affect everyone. If I'm like, what's a handbrake that everyone has? And it was so more, I looked more from the lens of stress and a cortisol in the adrenal space and looking at more how stress impacts physiology, impacts everything, right? And I suppose then I've more spoken on the broad topic of how stress impacts people's physiology, how it impacts body composition, how that impacts mood and stress and anxiety and sleep and recovery and libido and testosterone and estrogen, all that sort of stuff, but from the lens of stress and how that impacts the human experience, right? And then more recently, in the last few months, I've really gone, let's make this a little bit more specific and go, how do I help males optimize them specifically? How do I help women optimize themselves specifically? How do I do that? And I wasn't sure if there would be because they were more of a generalist audience, they'd be bigger events. I thought they'd be bigger events. But interestingly, no, there's a huge demand for knowledge in this area. People, particularly, I thought more so women, but interestingly, like even this week, I've done 2 seminars and did them both back to back, Monday and Tuesday through the same facility.
Achieve?
Yeah, Achieve Strength and Conditioning.
Yeah.
Man, they're good people out there.
Yeah.
Paul and Jesse out at Edgeworth, and they did a really great. They did the female night on the Monday night, and then the Tuesday night was us doing male optimization night. And interestingly, it was a bigger crowd than the male crowd. Didn't expect that.
Yeah.
See, I saw him. I follow him. I used to train there,
Cool.
and I saw him put it up, and I didn't realize it was coming up straight away because I was like, yeah, I should go to that. And then next minute, I saw you stand there, and I was just like, I fucking missed it.
we don't look again. I do it also. I don't market a great deal. I should because these, I've done ones where I have marketed. They've packed out. I've done big events, but when we've marketed them properly. But I suppose it's cool though in a smaller crowd too because it's more intimate.
Yeah.
If you can get 20, 30, 40 people, you can.
It's the same as us. Like when we do post up for big events, like there's always like we get like 15 to 20 people, and then a few people pull out, and then it gets a lot smaller, and then we're like, oh, it sucks, but then it actually ends up being a lot better because it's so much more intimate for that person.
Oh, way better, man.
Yeah.
You can deliver so much better, like especially in your guys' space where it's so personal. You need to give personalized advice too, and personalized time with the person. You need to give them like it's like a good friend of mine. He describes it as if you're unpacking a box, right? Well, if you take your time, you have to unpack the box and whatever that might be, whether that's trauma or previous stuff, what have you. Then you can't just sort of go, oh, okay, time's done, stuff it all back in. Whereas if you're in a group setting, I find the same thing hormonally. Someone comes to me and goes, oh, I've got an autoimmune disease, I've had leaky gut, I've got IBS, I've got, my thyroid's cooked, I've had stress issues for years, and you go, oh, okay, cool, no worries, man. Well, I've got 5 minutes with you, and then like that could, in a practitioner setting, that might take months, to sort out. So I actually really enjoy the smaller events where you can get 10, 20, 30 people in a room, and you can because you can actually give them individualized, impactful advice. It's not just I'm going to give you super basic like manage sleep and drink enough water.
That's why you see some of those big seminars where like David Goggins and all that come in. Like I've had a few people that went to it and just like you just pay this guy heaps of money and then they try and sign you up for their course kind of thing. So like he said, there's just so many people there. There's like hundreds of people there. And it just felt like you're saying, like it's not really personalised, and like it just felt like they just go to the same thing and tell the same people the same thing and just get their money and move on.
Yeah. It's such a balancing act because public speaking is such an art form, and I think like by no means mastering it. I'm learning as I go, but I think it's such a unique tool to be able to give someone something relevant to the person and relatable. And the interesting part is they're quite complex topics, right? Like hormones aren't super simple things. So trying to get it to quite a complex topic, break that down to a relatable format, find someone's touch points as well, see where it affects them specifically, understand what their personal symptom pictures are presenting as, find out what's your symptoms, how are you presenting, how's this manifesting in you, and then working it back to give them practical lifestyle or supplement hacks and stuff. So you got like it's better to be able to do that one-on-one, I suppose. But the good thing is we have the convenience of podcasts, because these things I started the business nearly 10 years ago. They weren't podcasts weren't an accessible thing to normal people. There was barely Facebook, like really, that was barely a thing too, So like, this is now so much cooler. We can do things like this and really spread, like we can talk to thousands of people now.
Yeah.
In a singular setting. It's,
the outreach is a lot easier. 100%. I remember when I first started doing this podcast, it was like the idea of having a microphone that had a USB that plugged into the laptop. That was like mind blowing to me. I was like, oh my God, that's possible, is it? And now all of a sudden we have this gear where it's just like, you just push one button. Yep. All right, we're good to go. And now it's just so much easier. So yeah.
It's really cool, man. It's really, really cool. And I think that, and one of the areas that I thought would be a disservice of us not to brush through, I suppose, in this one, is I think what I'm most keen about when I've been sitting down going, because we've been trying to put this together for a week or two now, and I've been thinking, what would be the most value I could give to your guys' listeners? If I was going to come into your space and sit with your people and go, what would I give that's the most value? I would like to think it would be having conversations with the languages from both parts of the world, the mental, the physical, and the otherwise. And then how I can hopefully give them some tips and tricks and the areas to look at that might inform both.
Yeah.
That's where I'd like to be able to give you guys something of value.
Let's do it.
Yeah, for sure.
You take over.
Yeah,
you
it's your show.
You lead the boat.
Okay, cool.
You ask us the questions.
Yeah, strap yourselves in, guys, because this is, I'm looking forward to this. Ty and I are just going to take this in.
Because I'll have a few questions later that for myself that I want to get answers to and like be able to get a bit better, like optimize my own health as well. So
of course,
you go and then
we'll just sit back.
Yeah, if you answer my questions in that, I'll be sweet.
Excellent. By all means, and look, stop me anytime. But I guess where I want us to lead us is just invite everyone to think who's listening. I suppose, like I said before, chicken the egg scenario for us to have a place where we can. So a lot of the times when we're talking about doing, let's say, breath work, for example, or doing meditations or guided works to try and get us into a space, often the terminology I'm hearing is they're saying dropping us into a space where we can actually, say, unpack something or be present or work on things, right? And this is very fascinating because when we say, like, for example, the language is dropping into a space versus in my world, we're trying to get our nervous system into a place where it'll allow us to switch off our cortisol, norepinephrine, adrenaline, so our primary stress hormones, our flight or fight hormones that gear us up to be in flight or fight. We have to wind those down. And to get us into a place to access that, to then we can be in a state to unpack things, right? So what I'd say is that there's a few different pieces to look at. One is if someone's looking at trying to optimize mental health, one has to have the state of mind to do so. One has to be in a place where you can be present, where you can be grounded, where you can actually process things. And I think that's where a lot of my early adrenal work was quite useful, because if you're in a place of stress, if you're in a place of being in flight or fight, your body acts very differently. Your chemistry acts very differently. It's geared towards survival, so it does things like it runs on different fuel sources than it normally would. Like just sitting here now, like being quite sure we should be oxidizing fat, for example. Like we're in a aerobic capacity right now, so our energy system we're using right now should just be oxidizing fat. Interestingly, though, if we were to have, say, like the workout I just did, or caffeine consumption, what have you, these things can actually, they're stressors. They're good stresses. Training is a stress on our body, but it's a good stress, right? So that can in itself increase the output of these stress hormones, and in so doing, change how my body utilizes fuel, change how cognitively we work as well. So our ability to think, with ration and logic can be compromised. Our ability to run on gut instinct and intuition, though, is heightened. So a lot of people might find, for example, if they have had chronic stress, which is quite often the trauma where you guys would cross paths with people, they might have had years of trauma or years of chronic stress or playing out patterning and behaviors that cause them stress, right? Sure. And where I meet these people, it's quite often presenting as different symptoms. And it looks different for everyone, but quite commonly you'll see, like, if chronic trauma is there, chronic stress hormones are there, and chronic stress hormones, or being in a chronically stressed state, will interfere with your ability to switch off and wind down and be present enough to be able to access a place where you can unpack something. Even when you see someone who's got, like, if they're in a heightened state, it's quite difficult to even slow them down in breath work. It might take them the first 10, 15 minutes to even get down to a point where they can wind down that nervous system, that background noise, because it becomes background noise, and that's the interesting part. What I always found with people is I was quite amazed at how few people recognised they were stressed. And I think you guys probably can very much speak to this, where people didn't realize how much trauma they were carrying, right? Or how much baggage they were carrying.
They never
do. Never do, right? And none of us do. Because we're adaptive things. Human species are incredible. We adapt. And I guess, so what we do is we look at, it could have been years. And so it becomes background noise because it can't always become, at first it might be a screaming signal, then it becomes gentler and gentler and gentler. It's in the background. And we become more and more resistant to these hormones too. But what I see in a lot of people, no one thing might be a massive source of stress, much like in the emotional space, it might not be any singular massive thing that's triggering someone or causing problems. But a lot of the time it might be, let's say your stress might not, the source of your stress might be just, maybe your job is fine. Maybe you're handling your 9 to 5 pretty well. It's okay. Not unbearable, a lot of work, but it's not crazy, right? But then we go, okay, cool, that's fine, that's bearable. What about family life? Yeah, got a lot on my plate, 3 kids, don't sleep much. Oh, okay, sleep's a bit crappy, and family life, bit on. So that plus the job, plus the no sleep. Okay, we're starting to get some volume, right? Then we go, okay, how's training? Oh, yeah, train 5 days a week. Oh, okay, ramp up that volume a little bit more. Okay, how are we eating right now? Oh, look, I'm pretty busy throughout the day. I often skip meals, I'll skip breakfast, replace them for coffee quite often. So usually I'll see under eating is more common than overeating, right? That also turns that volume up. And if we think about a nervous system, like we've got a volume dial, a lot of things slowly turn that up, crank that up, crank that up, crank it up. And it still resembles a normal day. We still get up in the morning, have energy. We still go down and sleep at night, eventually. But the wheels start falling off, right? And we start seeing that in different places. And I think why I'm going a bit deeper into the stress part is because I suppose it's probably the most informative and relevant part of this, right? Is that it's probably the one that has the most flow over effect to one. Can you even access a headspace where you could even want to improve yourself if you're in flight or fight, running on more adrenaline than actual energy from your cellular energy? Can you actually even get into a place where you'd want to unpack yourself? Because and so I guess if your listeners were going, well, what? This is all cool, this all sounds fine, but what's some things I could look for if I was stressed, and if that stress is impacting my current state of mind and how I show up in the world and how I tackle things, And so I would invite them to think. Sleep is a really good one. Sleep's where I often see that's a lot of the time where people start really breaking down when stress is a problem. So you'll see they take a long time to switch off at night. So if you're someone who your head hits the pillow and it takes you your mind just starts going. You can't, you think about the text you should have sent that day, the email you should have sent, the call you made, the person you had contact with, that conversation you didn't enjoy, that argument you had with a coworker. Oh God, tomorrow I've got so much on. I've got to set the alarm for this. I've got to do that. If you're the sort of person who sits down, sets an alarm, and you're stressing about the alarm before you go to sleep. You're worried about the next day before it even happens. You've always got this feeling of just something's wrong, but I'm not sure what it is. Just running on that gut feeling of something somewhere is falling apart. Or I'm just that gut instinct, that intuition. That starts kicking in as well. But that winding down part, you might get home from work and be physically buggered, but mentally you just can't switch off. You just go. And you might find you have to impulsively scroll or watch Netflix. Mute and distract and numb, is a common one.
Have you got much around talking about sleep and stuff now? Because I'm going through that at the moment, trying to optimise my sleeping to be a lot better.
Yeah, sleep's a fascinating one.
I'm off my phone from 7 p.m.
Good.
And then and then social media doesn't and nothing kicks in again until 7 a.m.
Great.
And then just trying to find I can sleep for a good 4 hours, and then after that I'm just boom, back awake. So I'm trying to find ways to go into a deeper sleep or just to get a better sleep, because sometimes I'll still wake up. Yep. The only reason I feel good is because I'm having an ice bath.
Yeah,
and it's getting me back up, and then it's slowly by the end of the week. Like last night I was asleep by 8 o'clock.
Yep.
And then back up again at 4 a.m. and then I was just. Yeah, so if you've got anything about around sleeping as well, I'd love to hear that.
Sleep's fascinating, man. Sleep's a great topic. And sleep informs your guys' world a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I've got a billion physical metrics on sleep, but the interesting part is in your world, it directly links to the ability for someone to emotionally process their day. So if you think about REM sleep and what it does to the body, we've got 3, light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. Otherwise, it gets different characterizations. Some call it stage 1, 2, 3, 4. Everyone has different languages, but I'll just, for simplicity of the listeners, light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. That's just an easy bucket to put those in, right? Now, REM sleep, if you think about your brain like a computer, throughout the day we take in buckets of information, right? So in the 70s, they actually they had a look in the 70s actually, and they could textualize it as newspapers, the amount of information we take in newspaper format, because in the 70s that was the main form of it.
That's it, yeah.
It's where you learn from, right? So in the 70s, the amount of information we took in a day that we consumed was likened to 3 newspapers in text, in terms of just information they got from either barely calls then, probably radio and a bit of early TV and what have you. They did that in 2019, so 3 years ago, again, and looking at all the text, calls, emails, DMs, Twitter, Insta, Facebook, work, call it, all the stimulus we have now, it was 146.
Yeah, well.
The amount of information we are just being bombarded with stimulus all day is phenomenal, right? And you see this play out in a million different areas. You see it in chronic lifestyle diseases related to stress. You see it with autoimmune issues, metabolic issues. You see it with so much, but sleep particularly you see it in. And you'll see an inability to stay asleep. So you're waking up throughout the night, for example, and you're finding you're just exhausted by the end of the week where you have to fall asleep at 8 p.m., and then, but you still might wake up and feel like you haven't slept. And only the ice bath is the thing giving you a kick, right? Well, an ice bath is actually a very acute modulator of your immune system. So it actually spikes spikes cortisol very quickly. And if you think about your cortisol is meant to go up in a curve, and it creates a nice bell shape. So it goes up in the morning and then down at night. So it's a very useful and powerful hormone. It liberates energy, so it's what literally gets you out of bed. If you look in a hospital setting, most deaths happen between 1 and 3 a.m. when cortisol is at its very lowest. And so that's why if you've seen the old movies, the nurses would come in and like flick the blinds open and like let the sun in and start, all right, everyone, get up. They're trying to spike cortisol, because that would switch off, inflammation, boot the immune system, get everything going, and it's actually that'd keep people alive, which is crazy. It's a very powerful hormone, yeah. But the tricky part is, if we have that background day I was speaking about, where you got work, job, kids, the 146 newspapers of bombardment of information,
it's just like
it just ramps it up and up, and this background adrenaline and cortisol, and these stress hormones that keep us in flight or fight, continue to do so through to the evening. Now, we're usually so physically exhausted, we still get to sleep. It might take a while, but you'll get to sleep. But when you look at your sleep data or what your sleep architecture is like, you'll see that you have low deep sleep and low REM sleep particularly. And if you don't have REM sleep, you don't dream, for one. So that's a good indicator. I'm not home going, if I don't track sleep with a Garmin or an Apple Watch or whatever, how do I see if my sleep's trash? Do you dream? Do you wake up through the night? Do you go to the bathroom? Do you not? A lot of people mistake that as a hydration problem. It's not. It's not that you're drinking too much water before bed. You're getting up to go to the bathroom because cortisol's way of waking you up. It's going, oh, I'm still got some background adrenaline. I'm not safe. Get up. And that's its way of doing it, because cortisol can also modulate the way your body holds fluid, holds blood volume, blood pressure, sodium, heaps of amazing mechanisms, right? Where it'll start like getting you to, I suppose, wake up however it can. So everyone goes, I'm drinking too much water before bed. It's not a hydration thing. So the reason they're waking up to go to the bathroom is a cortisol thing. We know that's a really good sign. If they've got wake events at all, if you're tossing and turning, you're a light, restless sleeper, you might wake up at the middle of the night between 1 and 3 a.m. I'm sure everyone's had this. You wake up to go to the bathroom, you go, oh, up. Cool. Yeah, nice. Mad. Must be morning time. You look at your watch, it's 1 a.m. You're like, what? And it's a pain in the ass. Then you try to go back to sleep, and you're like, it takes you ages to get back to sleep. And when you time to finally do, your alarm goes off, and you're just like, just groggy.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh God, really? Like you feel like you're hit by a truck. You're like, should I have just stayed up from 1 a.m.?
Yeah, sure. Started my day then.
Should I just start my day then? And so I think like if it's in that 1 to 3 a.m. bracket, you're waking up as well. Quite often that's a stress thing. The reason you're sort of finding it hard to stay asleep for longer blocks of time is you've probably gone through light sleep, bit of deep sleep, maybe just hit REM and then bumped out.
Yeah, because I've got my Garmin, and that's how I kind of track it. And it's like it'll be in deep for like, sometimes it even says like 3 minutes or like.
Goddamn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It's just like a bit of REM and then
Bit
just
of
keeps the
stress
light
there,
sleeping.
So we're on the polar opposites. He always says this to me, and I'm like, I've told him to implement so many things, and it's still same thing. And then like,
I don't wake up to an alarm. I haven't woken up to an alarm in over a year.
Yeah,
so
we can.
I have a clock. That's a sunrise clock. So it's instead of waking up to sound, because when you hear sound, it's just like it'll shock you.
Yeah.
So I've tried to just do it with light. So it's a natural, so it's kind of like a natural sunrise.
Yeah.
So it's like dark, gets lighter, and then I naturally just open my eyes and I feel a lot calmer. I don't like fuck.
Yeah.
And that's been a massive help, heaps big help. Like that's set the tone for the day. So it's like I'm not just waking up being like fuck, gotta do this, gotta do that. I just wake up and I'm like, all right, it's time to get up.
But the funny thing is, on the opposite side, I dream every single night, like every night, unless of course if I have like.
And he's got 2 kids, so I don't understand.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to have 2
like
kids.
if I have like a broken sleep or so last night's sleep was pretty crap. Like I was up at like 2 then 4, but that's because yesterday was a stressful day and it's been a stressful week to be honest. But probably like 90-95% of each night, like I'm dreaming, and it's not like it's not like I wake up and I'm like, oh, what did I dream about? Like I can wake up and I can like literally go through the whole thing again.
Okay, this is interesting. We got two, and you made a good comment there. One is cool. I'll unpack that in a sec.
Yep.
With the waking up and how that changes and modulates things.
Yep.
A lot of people, I'm sure a lot of listeners will find this eventually is a manifestation of long-term stress as well. You start waking up and actually instantly feeling overwhelmed. A lot of time, a lot of people wake up and they're already heightened. Something like an alarm sets them off, right? And because that if you think about the curve normally being like this, like curve up in the morning, down at night, up in the morning, down at night. Well, if it's more like this, like heightened, then they get a little light dip of sleep and then back up again. Well, because it's already that volume knob's turned right up, by the time they've woken up, if you get even a small amount of stimulus on, they wake up, have their coffee, and it's just like, boom, my mind is racing. I'm really on edge already. I'm a bit anxious already, stressing about the day already. You're already on edge, like an alarm, alarm clock. Bzz, bzz, oh God, okay, shit. God, what time is it? Fuck, okay, oh, another day. Oh God, another day. All right, didn't even sleep. Oh, I feel so tired. Coffee, boom, more stimulants, more stress. Oh God, volume up further and further. And so interestingly, not a bad move, right? Light will do that too, because it'll actually blunt off like melatonin release, start a bit of a cascade to say it's daytime.
Yeah.
But the reason where yours is interesting with the sleep part. Now, I speak to a lot of people who are, I suppose, starting to speak to more people in my circle that are, they're starting to coach in this space or do breath work or do other things. And interestingly, a lot of things that in the spiritual space is also modulating your nervous system through different ways. So your ice bath is actually modulating your nervous system. You're waking up, you're having rather tragic sleep quality, waking up buggered, you jump in the ice bath, you feel okay, because that's doing the spike of the cortisol your body should do for you. Right? So instead of it naturally going up, you're going, all right, flat, bugger at ice bath, buzz, and you're spiking it for you, right, automatically. Now, you're interestingly getting good deep sleep or REM sleep, likely because you might, I don't know whether there's breathwork practices or meditative things or things throughout the day that also help you modulate your curves. So it's all about, this is where like languages come together, right? Like where, I suppose, and the REM sleep is actually where you get to emotionally process too. So in the actual physicalities of it, deep sleep and REM sleep and having enough sleep will improve fat oxidation, improve muscle building, 30% of your testosterone is produced in the first 4 hours of sleep, growth hormone production, so much good stuff comes out of sleep, right? Versus, I suppose, in the mental space though, think of it like your brain like a computer. It can't do a backup unless it has REM. So the ability to process trauma, process stress, process anxiety, process negative experiences, all that requires REM. And this is why you start seeing people who have broken sleep get more and more overwhelmed, more and more hyperreactive, more and more, I suppose everything starts building up and accumulating because they're not able to back dump it. They can't download the computer, so to speak. They can't. A big part of, they found it when they did sleep deprivation studies, it ended up leading to increased rates of suicide risk, depression, insomnia, I suppose. People just broke their mind when they couldn't sleep properly. Yeah, it just really, really screwed with the ability to emotionally process stuff.
Well, I can definitely relate to that when I had our 2 kids. Like I said, going from a place of, I'm thankful I'm back there, able to have those deep REM sleeps. But when we had our 2 kids, sleep deprivation was just never experienced it before. Yeah. I would be asleep for an hour, then up for 2 hours, sleep for another hour, up for 2 hours, and did that for months until the babies started to fall asleep once more. And we're thankful. Luca, our second one, he was a bit better. Yeah. But Alia, our first one, oh my God, it was a few months of just 3 hours a night, 2 hours a night. Damn. Sometimes not even any at all. Trying to go to work and process, and like you said, all those I just felt incapable of processing anything. It was insane. I couldn't process even an emotion of like a stress or even anger. I didn't even know how to process anger. I felt angry, but I didn't know what to do with it.
Yes. That's an interesting one. And the reason being is you've got, if you think about, so they found through just one night's disrupted sleep quality, there's a few things. Cortisol increased by 31%. Testosterone declined by 24%. Insulin resistance increased by 31%. So your ability to actually handle nutrients, actually use sugar as a fuel, went down a third. Testosterone tanked a quarter. Cortisol went up a third. So literally, you couldn't deal with things. You couldn't process emotions. You were more stressed, and you can't cognitively be the same. If you have a bad sleep, your cognitive impairment is the equivalent of I think it was 2 units. I think it was what was it? It was something like 2 hours less sleep per night was the equivalent cognitively of having 1.5 standard drinks.
Yeah, wow.
Crazy, man. And that increases as you go on. And in my background, I was actually an environmental scientist in mining for a long time. And we had fatigue limits on site, and it was 14 hours was your absolute max they'd let you work. And it was because if you went anything over 14 hours, again, the fatigue equivalent, if you were driving capability, was the same as driving mid-range drink driving. If you're awake, if you had worked for longer than those hours, it was such a high risk. It's nuts how one impairs the other. But if you're trying to look at if you have people coming to connection events or to trying to help, even access places where they can start to process emotion, you've got to work on the background stuff, because you can't expect someone to be in this state of flight or fight to be in this, because if they're stressed, their sleep's crappy, right? If they're stressed, like sleep's crappy, you can guarantee the way their body utilizes food is crappy as well. Their metabolism slows down, so they're probably storing body fat. They're probably not recovering very well. They're probably in a less ideal place, like body composition wise, and that influences self-esteem, self-worth. It influences how we treat ourselves. Look at ourselves, how we do all that, and how we approach exercise goes from being something to improve myself to I punish myself or I restrict myself, and it changes the messaging about your whole life, right? And if we look at let's pick the male example, right? So let's say how stress impacts men. Well, cortisol will directly lower testosterone, like acutely and chronically. It'll lower testosterone. Now, testosterone is linked to dopamine. Dopamine is a very good neurotransmitter. It's involved in motivation, reward, drive, pursuit of a goal. So if you think about when you're a young man and you're like, let's just go crush the world. Let's just go out there, hook in. I'm going to do absolutely everything. I'm going to climb the tallest mountain, just go, right? That just drive, that feeling is very much a result of high testosterone and therefore high dopamine as well. Now, as we increase stress, we drop testosterone and directly drop dopamine as well. So we start putting ourselves in a place where we're going, well, if I've got low testosterone and low dopamine, it's very difficult to have any drive to pursue a goal. It's also diminished reward when you do get a goal, because dopamine is a reward system as well. And it's like diminished satisfaction upon receipt of a goal. And it's also lower motivation and mood. And dopamine's also involved in libido too. So usually sex drive drops as well. Libido's gone. Like most of your areas start tanking. And if you start looking at all the areas you need to optimize mental health, well, you would like to think you would be someone who's to even get off the couch to go to an event. Can take it. You're motivated to improve yourself, right? You've got to want to put in the work over a long period of time and get the reward of improving yourself. A lot of those systems rely heavily on those neurotransmitters, a lot on dopamine, and so in men that's very much the case. And unfortunately, the poor dears with women, I suppose, like testosterone has this beautiful ability when it's optimal too. It's quite protective against stress. When estrogen's high though, so when testosterone's high in men, that's a great thing. It's very protective against stress. And I suppose it helps us switch off things. So if you go like people trying to process things from a busy day, right? Get home at night and they're like, I just want to unpack how that day was so I can decompress and be present with my family, say. That might be a nice goal for someone, right? Well, if they've had a very, very stressful day, typically if you have optimal testosterone, for example, that has a nice little feedback loop where it can actually switch off the stress signal to the brain and I suppose give you the ability to where you can go, you know what, that was a pretty fucked day, but I'm good. It's done now. I can put it to bed. And you can switch that off, right? Trickier part is as testosterone starts lowering, that negative feedback loops buggers off, and you don't have the ability to switch that day off anymore. And it starts creeping in more and more and more to your presence of mind, and it becomes where you can't switch your head off. And you're always like, oh god, work, and and your family's there, and you're just like, oh, just and you try, it's always with you, and you can't switch it off. Now, women, unfortunately, don't have that negative feedback loop. They don't have that off switch with estrogen. Doesn't have the same effects that testosterone does. So it's even harder for them to switch off that loop as well. So female biology is a fascinating one, and it responds even more cripplingly to stress because reproduction is the female biology's highest calling, like in terms of what its priorities are. So if you think about what signals it needs, well, it's scanning its environment constantly in the case of women, going, am I safe? Do I have shelter? Do I have enough food? Do I have enough energy balance to actually reproduce? And if any of those signals are no, and they scan this frequently, 4 times a second, their nervous system is asking that question. And if they're not safe, they're not secure, they're not feeling like we've got enough food, enough shelter, enough safety, enough security, then it will actually down-regulate hormone production because it goes, well, I shouldn't reproduce, I'm stressed. I shouldn't reproduce, I'm starving. So a lot of people doing chronic dieting over years, training hard, having lots of caffeine, working full-time jobs, being single parents, being all that sort of stuff is just smashing that signal saying we're not safe, we don't have security, we don't have enough food, we don't have enough resources. And so it starts down-regulating hormone production, starts messing around with estrogen and how the metabolism functions. And then, the poor things wonder why they can't switch off at night, can't get good sleep, why they're holding stubborn body fat. And that just puts them in this unfortunate chemical situation too, where that informs their headspace gets negative, their self-esteem goes low, their self-worth goes low. And then when they come to one of your events, it's even harder to try and get to a place where they can have that positive self-worth in that, so it's this big cyclical effect. You can't have one without the other. And they both must be addressed,
Yeah, it's amazing how it all correlates, eh?
Yeah.
I'm just looking over here. Do you know that meme where that guy he's like, whoa, and the stars are flying around him like the universe?
Oh man, everything's just hitting. All the questions are getting in.
Yeah,
it's good.
Particularly the stress one, man. I think it's quite interesting because I suppose it's a lot of the time it's the root cause. And I mean, for a fascinating array of lifestyle diseases, issues, disorders, problems. A lot of it comes from just chronic stress, right? And I think that's if nothing else people can take home. If you can start being aware of stress, you can also make some other inferences. But if you've come to, if they've come across your guys' path with the intention of improving their own self-awareness, emotional awareness, personal, mental health, what have you, I guess a really great thing a really good service you could do for your body to put you in the best position to be able to do that goal would be to try and cover some basic foundations, right? And if you look at I guess it's all doom and gloomy thus far, in terms of these things will smash your biology, this will ruin sleep and ruin hormones and libido and recovery and rah-rah. But the good thing is, because I suppose all the hormones talk. Think about how your body works. Everything comes from the one source. Everything comes from cholesterol. Okay, so all hormones are made from one thing. So fatty acids, cholesterol, that's the one substrate. So you've got one parent hormone that makes all hormones. Sex hormones, your testosterone, your estrogen, makes your adrenal hormones, the cortisol, those survival hormones we spoke about, makes your metabolic hormones as well for your thyroid to actually run your metabolism, dictate how fast you burn calories and things happen. So if you've got one place where all the hormones come from, I suppose you've always just got to ask yourself, what am I trying to ask of my body today? Because that will dictate where your body puts those resources. Will it put it in the stress bucket? Will it put it down the primary sex hormone pathway? Will it put it down the metabolic pathway? Well, given the stress bucket isn't overwhelming, it will shunt it towards where it needs to go. So in the female example, reproduction. Well, maybe I am safe now. Maybe I am secure. Maybe I have got enough food. I'm going good. Instead of eating a calorie deficit, maybe I'm eating at maintenance now. Instead of having crappy sleep, which is contributing directly to stress, maybe I'm having good sleep now. I suppose we can also start putting in some good life hacks and some good supplement hacks to try and put that in the right order, so that then that informs your biology to calm down, in one of an easier term, to then allow us to move forward to do some cool things with the rest of us. And it's quite interesting. And one question I actually have of you guys. So I've heard a few times now, and I find it quite tricky to unpack, that you store trauma, or you can store these things in your body, right? Now that's very interesting. I'd actually like to ask you guys just to explain that a little bit, because I'm really fascinated by that concept, because we don't really have that same memory chemically. We have wiring patterns and firing patterns. Our body knows what to do in certain situations. Sure. You walk into a classroom, you used to get grilled by your teacher when you were young. You walk into a classroom environment, you can be triggered, right? You can spike cortisol and go, fuck this. My body recognizes this as a stressful environment. Sure. But the idea of storing is a very interesting concept for me, because it doesn't. You don't normally do things that it doesn't normally work that way, hormonally speaking. So I'm interested.
So from, do you want to take it, or?
I'll go for it. You go first.
Yeah,
I'll just tell you what my experience with what I felt with stored energy, stored trauma, and then how I've felt from it, from releasing it.
So from the point of view of storing it, the concept of what you're speaking about, hormones and physical pieces and everything like that, is conscious. It's your conscious system. You are able to assess that from a conscious point of view. But when we're speaking about storing pieces, that's coming from your unconscious mind. So to break that down, there's two parts to your mind: conscious mind, unconscious mind. Consciously, what we can assess through here, a life event must happen to you through one of your five senses. So through your VACOG: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory. So visual, seeing something; auditory, hearing something; kinesthetic, feeling something; olfactory, smelling something; gustatory, tasting something. One of those five things, if that happens to you, that's a life event. And then through that, your reticular activation system, a piece within your brain, processes it down, and we have billions and billions, I think it's 400 billion bits per second of information coming towards us. Consciously, then we process that down to 2,000 bits per second. So you have all this information coming towards us, but in our conscious piece of place, that is how much information we have, is 2,000 bits per second. So when we are in our conscious world, like we are right now, speaking about hormones and speaking about our physical body and things that happen to us and everything like that, that's in our conscious mind. But you have your unconscious mind, where we can store our suppressions. We can put pieces to the side where, say for example, in your conscious mind, I'm sure you could remember what you had for dinner last night, if you thought about it. Maybe 5 days ago, if you really thought about it, you could push yourself to think, yep, I can remember what I had 5 days ago. But if I told you to tell me, all right, what did you have on February the 5th? What did you have for dinner? Your brain would be like, no chance. In your unconscious mind, we're storing it there. Everything that's happened to us, every piece of that throughout our whole life systems, it gets stored into a piece of our mind that we cannot access until we start to access it through meditations, through breathworks, through dreaming, our dream state, to allow our unconscious mind to come speak as well. So in regards to storing, like you said, storing trauma comes through that way. So I won't really speak on in regards to like storing trauma and energy and emotions within your body and pieces like that, because coming from a scientific point of view, I wouldn't be able to point you in the right direction in a scientific point of view.
I would like to hear it from the non-scientific point of view, because I intend to obviously speak to my part of the field, but I'd love to hear it from a non-scientific, because that's what is really intrigued me lately, is I suppose hearing it, there's things that it doesn't explain, right? And I love trying to reverse engineer why. Yeah. So I'd love to hear the non-scientific. I'd love to hear
like you said, things that you can't explain, but it's there. Like stuff that we see, man, is just like what the fuck? Like how is that in your body that's just come out of your body? Like through our breath work, what we take our breath work through men and women. Like we've had guys turn over on concrete slabs of floors and turn over and punch the ground like 40 times, like as hard as they can, like punching. And in your conscious realm, there's no way you would look at a concrete floor and go, I'm going to punch the fuck out of that for 40 times. But through this breath work that we take them through, they roll over and they punch the hell out of it, screaming.
Not every time, but
not every
just so people
person.
know, it's just like they're not going to come and just break your hands.
Every punch, just he was going for it. We've had guys start like on the other side of the office and work all the way to the back over here through the breath work, screaming, fuck you, fucking processing it and moving it through your body. And
like some people too, like we had a guy just crack up laughing. And he was just like, he was let a lot of anger out, let a lot of yell. And then I thought he was about to start crying. So I put my hand on his chest. And then he just sat there and had this huge smile on his face and started laughing just like for ages.
I had that experience with him.
And he'd come out and he was just like, he was so happy. He's like, I'm so happy. Like, and I was just like, I know you're happy. You let us know. Don't worry.
Yeah. So from our point of view and what I've seen, what I've gone through myself in regards to my own personal breathwork journeys is, my unconscious mind brings forward things that have happened either to me, what I've experienced, what I've experienced secondhand, something that I may have stored that I didn't want to process, and they've brought it forward, and I get to play it out and
like
release it through that way.
So it's like for me, we did one. I think it was the first or second time I did before I became into working with Jacob when I was a client. We did this breath work, and I was struggling with like commitment to my partner at the time. And which was like buying a house. And when I went into this breathwork, I was just thinking of that. But then all this other shit come up from the past of like what happens around commitment. When I do commit, so much bad things happen. So all these things that happened when I was younger, and then all the stuff I've been through in my life, all come up as that. And I was like, that's the stuff I needed to process, not this thing. It went deeper. So that's what's so good about it. It looks at things that are a lot deeper and then brings it to the surface, and then you fucking deal with it right there and then.
Okay, that's interesting, because I see that a lot as well. I think a lot of people, a lot of the time what we see as the immediate thing we want to put a Band-Aid on is well downstream of what is actually the problem. Well, that sounds to be a theme for you guys.
That's like now with like what you're speaking about. So like stress for me, so I've been in the mining I was in the mining for the last 13 years and all my stress was coming from work. So I was waking up at 3 a.m, getting ready to drive up Musselbrook. Just doing 12-hour days and driving home and trying to deal with going to the gym and then dealing with relationships, life, like finances, everything just came into one. And I was like, I need to fix this. So out of the mines, and now I just work every now and then. One of my mates is concreting and just do that for now, and then hopefully be full time doing this. So I'm trying to limit my stress, but then I'm still having a little bit of stress. So when I'm like, if I'm constantly always doing something. So he's like, once I was like, it was like 8:30 at night, and I was like, anyone in the sauna I want to go down? Then he's like, go to sleep. Yeah. And I kept saying something. He's like, just rest. It's okay.
Well, actually, let's use that as an example. So I guess I spoke a little bit about symptoms of high stress and stuff for people to listen to, because it's probably it's a good theme here, right? Chronic stress, chronic trauma, chronic things, where long-term package, storing energy, this sort of stuff. So I guess that's one of them. Inability to sit still, being, even though you might be physically buggered, like you might be like, I recognise I'm tired. I recognise it's been a 12-hour day. I recognise that it's the end of the day. It's 8:30 at night. I should be winding down to sleep. I still can't sit still. I still feel I should go do an activity. I still feel I should be up cleaning the house. I feel like I should be out, moving, mowing the lawn. I should be out. I should do something, right? Because it's like that. Sitting still is like the exact opposite priority for your body in that time, right? And that background noise from the day hasn't settled down yet, because that a and most things take longer than we think. Caffeine consumption, for example, its half-life is 4 to 5 hours, so the full elimination time is 8 to 10 hours. So if we're having caffeine at midday, it's not fully gone till 8 to 10 p.m, and that's at noon, which is a very modest time to be eliminating caffeine. Yeah. No one stops at 12 p.m. for coffee, right? Like, it's always like 2, 3, 4 p.m. You get to work and you have that 2, 3 p.m. energy dump, coffee, boom, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Every time, right? 3 p.m, well, 10 hours plus, you're at 1 a.m. Before it's physically left your system. The mental arousal wears off quickly, because that's the other sort of common symptom picture of high stress, is that you'll become immune to stimulants as well. Because if you think about, much like with probably trauma, I'd imagine, I suppose, the chronic signal of stress, first it's a scream, then I goes it's talking, then it's a whisper. Because you have to down-regulate sensitivity to the stimulus, otherwise you're just constantly blasting out stress, right? So your body becomes a bit numb to it. But if you try and think of, if you've got your ceilings here, but you're here, if you take a stimulant that will increase adrenaline, norepinephrine, and so on, it can get you from here to here, and that's the mental arousal. That's the felt effect of caffeine, right? Which is great. That's awesome. Caffeine's a useful tool at different times. But if someone's already at their ceiling, something I always see, I'll see people having like, oh man, I'm having 2, 3, 4 coffees a day, plus pre-workout, plus a fat burner, plus training, plus... And, they'll be like, or you'll see like a 60-kilo girl having 300 milligrams of caffeine pre-workout, having a pre-workout with 400 megs of caffeine. You're like, that should buckle you. You should be nauseous and on the floor spew. Like, you wouldn't have 400 megs of caffeine, that's 4 shots of coffee. You wouldn't have 4 coffees or 5, that's 5 Red Bulls. Red Bull's 80 milligrams of caffeine, right? And a lot of pre-workouts now, that's why I'm not a big fan of big parts of my industry, because a lot of the supplement industry is so... you have to earn the right to be able to put down 500 megs of caffeine and not just cook your nervous system, Yeah. But unfortunately, it's such a popular industry, pre-workouts, and it's fun to be like that big wide felt effect. But like, and it would have been easier money in my world if I just made a caffeinated pre-workout, because everyone wants caffeine. But it's such a common source of stress for people, and the ability to, and when you become numb to it, and you see someone go from a single shot coffee once a day, they just wake up, have a coffee on the way to work, then they go to a double shot over time, they might go another coffee at lunchtime, and then it bleeds into another coffee at lunchtime, and then they might throw in an afternoon one as well over time, and after a while they go from 100 megs a day to 200 to 300 to 400, and they still have, and I suppose it's the same, that signal gets muted more and more, and they find they become almost immune to caffeine. But ironically, caffeine was the only thing that gave them energy. So a lot of people that come to ice baths, for example, they feel incredible the first time, because they've been so stressed for so long, they're so burnt out, and their body, our energy system is dependent on this waking in the morning. So they wake up feeling flat for years, throw in an ice bath, it's the biggest acute stimulus on your nervous system you can have. It's the biggest artificial spike of your cortisol you could have. Yeah. So of course they feel good. It's probably the first time they've had a proper functional cortisol response in years.
Well, that's so funny you say that, because the guy I'm doing it with, he's a concreter, and he was a very stressful person, and he keeps saying to me, he goes, these ice baths help me so much. And I'm picking up on it, and I don't want him to think it's just the ice bath. I want him to be able to, so I've started to incorporate doing a bit of breath work, and he never used to really speak about his emotions or feelings and stuff like that. Now he's starting to open up a little bit more, so it's like, nice. I don't want him just to think of it, it's just the ice bath.
Yeah.
Which is just definitely helping. 100% it's helping. But
I had this exact scenario with actually a good friend of mine, Nerida. So she was going. I go to Junto Men's Hub here in
nice.
Newey.
Oh yeah, we need to get those guys on.
They're awesome. Yeah, you do. You 100% do. And like she was like, go to an ice bath. I was like, oh man. And she's like, no, go. And then she got Michael, the owner, to ring me as well that night. And she's like, 8:30 that night, and it was raining, and I was like, fuck, it's 5:30 in the morning. Do I want to go? She's like, no, go do it. Jump in, you'll feel great. I'm like, okay, fuck it, I'll go. And then Michael rings me, you're going, dude. I'm like, all right, cool, sweet. So I get rock up in the morning, jump in. I focus on all that, do the experience, do the breath work, jump into the ice bath, awesome, do feel good, and then move on and start my day. Nerida rings me, how was it? How's the experience? And I go, oh man, that ice bath was really cool. That felt great. That was awesome. Got in there, got out on the road now, going to work. And I did that ice bath and drove to Dubbo, did a seminar at Dubbo that night. It was like a 17-hour day. It was fucked, but I did that anyway. But it was all about the ice bath. And she's like, you fool, you're meant to go for the connection with the male, but you're meant to go there to actually have the connection part. Like, you're meant to go there to actually connect with these other like-minded people and have a great time and actually have the connection part and not the actual physical part. I was just focusing on the physicality of it, which I think men, we are very physical beings. We're doers. Yeah. We're doers, Yeah. So, it's funny. I thought that's all she wanted me to go for, was just the physical experience of an ice bath. That was the positive of it. And she's like, no, it's being with 20 other like-minded guys.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't speak to no one.
I did, man. I literally was like, hey, man, there you go. Sponge, sweet, nice.
See you later.
She's like, you're an idiot, you missed it. Like, what are you doing? Slapped the face. She took weeks to get me to something like that. It was hilarious. Hey, she's like, that was the wrong focus. Hey, but people wonder, why do I feel great after an ice bath? Well, probably because for years and years you haven't had a similar increase in cortisol at the right time. And they do it in the morning usually. So they get up and they might not have felt good in the morning for years because they probably had this just overwhelmed, sort of adrenal system, this overwhelmed stress response all the time. And the tricky part is, at first, it keeps you overwhelmed at height and run. But if it can't always do that, your body can't always be in flight or fight. So over time, your body actually has to become resistant to it. So if you think about how your body works, it can't afford to wait to see if something's is a life-threatening situation. Because historically, it could be. You could, you stubbing your toe could be a snake bite. You could be dead. Like from where we actually evolved from, it was much more dangerous times than we are now, right?
Sure,
We're in the safest part of human history. So our body doesn't wait to see, was that brushing on my skin there, was that a bite, or is that a problem? So it sort of punches first, asks questions later. It boots adrenaline instantaneously. If you have that, get up through the night, stub your toe, adrenaline. Yeah. Because it's going, all right, switch off inflammation, get that thing under control, get blood to that area, start everything. Then, ironically, cortisol, the stress hormone, which gets bashed a lot in now, but it actually comes along about 10 seconds later. So have you ever heard that thing like count to 10 or do 10 deep breaths? There's science in that. It's about a 10-second lag between where your body goes, okay, I've punched, now are we good? Are we safe? After about 10 seconds, if it is, okay, cortisol comes in, actually switches off that signal. But if you've just been blasting that signal for 10 years, you're putting out buckets and buckets of cortisol, trying to switch it off, it becomes resistant to it. It's no longer as effective. It's sort of like over time the signal gets muted and you need more and more and more to turn it off. But the problem then, and over time then, like we said, there's only one hormone for everything. It starts pulling it all. I suppose you get this place where it gets depleted, it gets low, and you start going, oh fuck, and your body starts conserving it because I can't pump this out every second of the day, And you get in this place where people wake up feeling like zombies. They wake up, they feel like I haven't slept. Their stress is too high to let them sleep, but they're not sleeping deep enough to refresh from the stress. They wake up and carry it into the next day. Sure. They're living on caffeine, they're zombies, and the only good feeling they have is when they have an immense strike, like jump in, literally freezing cold water to freak the fuck out of your body. Then they're like, oh, I feel amazing. It's like, well, that probably tells me your nervous system's cooked, because when I jump in them, I don't actually feel much different because my nervous system's healthy. I know how to modulate it. I do a lot of adrenal supplementation. I look at sleep quality. I track data. It's not a huge difference. It's like, yeah, it's great, cool, but it's actually not a difference because my cortisol curve is already quite healthy. So, everyone else is like, oh man, weren't you really amped up? I'm like, yeah, a bit, man, but I already am because my nervous system works.
Well, I think that's why I find it a bit, that's why I'm trying to get in. It's not just the ice baths, it's doing all the breath work stuff, all the mindset stuff, actually working on yourself to make it feel. So when I get in there, it's like they will get in there and they do feel a lot hyped than I am. Yeah. I just know what the benefits of it doing it for me is. It's just not so much just to feel good. It's just more like the mental game of it. If I can get through this ice bath, any other challenge through the day is going to be a breeze. So that's why I like doing it like that. Then when I first started doing it was all about get in there, feel really fucking good. And that's where he's at now. He's at that point of he's so heightened when he gets in there and he's just like, fuck yeah, this is so good. He's hyped up, he's ready to go. And where I just sit in there and I'm just nice and comfy and then calm and...
It's funny what it brings out. I've noticed it's different every time too, and I imagine you probably would see this with breath work. It might bring out different things every session.
Yeah, every time.
I find that with the ice baths. I'll get in some weeks that if my nervous system's cranked, if I've had a big week at work, I'll go in there and it'll kick my ass. I'll get in and I'll be fighting it the whole time, going, really grunting through it.
You see people's egos kick in. So on the weekend, I remember this girl got in, she's like, oh, this isn't that bad. And then 10 seconds later, she's like, fuck. And I was just like, oh, there's your ego. Yeah, it's a good little checker.
It's a fascinating one, that, because I think to switch gears a little from just purely the biology so I don't bore your listeners. I think it is interesting, I suppose, how it can, that's probably one of my few examples where I've actually seen firsthand where it brings up things you weren't aware from your subconscious, right? You get in there and some days it'll just boot you and the whole thing you just have to fight it every second. You feel really ramped up and you feel a bit tense and resistant. Then other times you get in, you're just laughing, chilling, having a good time and you're yeah man, and you're really wound down. And you'll see that with your week and you don't realise that how much you're carrying around still from that week or how wound up you are. And that was one of the times where I actually, that's why I asked about the stored energy vibe and subconscious, I guess, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I've had some interesting physical phenomena too, so I had a particularly horrendous relationship breakdown, and I suppose at the start of the year, and that was probably my last big slap to the face signal going, sort this out, have a look at some other things, right? Look at some patterns of behaviour, and I worked right back down to literally inner child work, right back down to being literally childhood and then rebuilt from the start.
Yeah, nice.
Looked at patterns of behaviour, looked at learned patterns, things that were influenced from childhood as well versus now, looked at attachment styles, looked at literally just did an audit of myself and tried to just tear me down to nothing and then work back up slow. I'm still trying to do that. It's only been a few months now. I'm still in the process of rebuilding from there. But interestingly, despite not many changes in diet, nutrition or training, I dropped probably 2, 3, 4 kilos of body fat in that process, which didn't make a huge amount of sense. But I guess if we look at where a lot of people come into training, come into the fitness industry, it's either they were the overweight one or they were the skinny one. In bodybuilding, I say that anyway, that's my background. It'd either be the guy that was, had small man syndrome, or it'd be the person who was very overweight before. I was the overweight one, and that's where my interest in hormones came along. My two brothers were genetic freaks; they just have abs year round, and I was 96 kilos at 11 years old. So I had
holy fuck, you're a big dude.
Big, I was a big kid, and so mine came from that place, right? So I always wondered, why did my body act so differently with the same environment, same diet, same nature and nurture to my two brothers? Genetic material's the same, environment's the same, diet's the same, literally everything's the same. How in this controlled experiment can I be drastically different? They can be walking six packs and I'm 100 kilos as a teenager, and it was quite interesting. So I always thought that's what got me down the path of what makes your body tick and what makes things work. And I guess looking at that in training come out, I guess maybe some of my stored stuff was actually stored, but maybe I was holding on to it in body fat maybe, or was holding on in that form or what have you. And same with my shoulder. I had really bad recurring shoulder injuries. It always just felt tight and niggly and bad. My thoracic was always so tight, and I'd get remedial every few weeks and whatever. And now it's since I've had that, I'm it's actually remarkably functional. I move better, and that doesn't get continually locked up and tight. My traps don't get tight more. And I know that stress gets stored in the traps and gets stored in the upper back a lot, particularly in men. But it's interesting now seeing how much that's released, weirdly enough, and how much body fat dropped and hasn't come back, despite me eating more calories and training the same. I'm there might be something to this stored thing. there might be something there.
There is, because saying that too, when I saw my naturopath, she was cool. She looked and did this thing with your eyes, and she can tell things that are stored inside with you. And she looked at me in the eye and she said, "You've had a shoulder injury." And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I think you should look into that. It's called
iridology.
Yeah, bro, it is crazy, man. And some of the stuff she's new things with my shoulder, that's happened with my past, just all this stuff. And she's yeah, it's stored there. And I was just talking about that with your stored, our stored energies and stored trauma. And
that's funky.
It's crazy, eh?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's wicked, man. I get along really well with naturopaths. They're probably more how I tend to look at it. I probably formulate somewhere between sports and naturopathy, I suppose. Wellness meets performance is sort of where my brand messaging is. But because you can't have one without the other. You can't perform if you're not well, and if you're not well, you won't perform. So but definitely looking at the whole person has always been where I've tried to look. But ironically though, the whole person minus anything to do with spirituality or emotion. This just wasn't on my radar. But it's.
Oh man, do you reckon I should tell you about the phenomenon that happens to me 24/7?
With your sister?
Yeah.
Oh.
Blow his mind.
Yeah.
My phenomenon that happens to me literally every single day is when I was being born into this world, I was a twin. My twin passed away at birth. But over the years, weird stuff always used to happen. Lights and electricity would just turn off with me. I've had my car, just lights turn off, turn back on. I've had the car full mechanics stop while it's been driving, turn back on.
Do you reckon Lauren's blaming that for when she burnt the
yeah, don't go there. Don't go there. And then so over the years of growing up and going through all these weird things happening to me, I was what the fuck? Maybe I've just got something attached to me or something like that. If you're gonna go down the spirit realm. But then over time, after doing some work, seeing psychics and mediums and all that type of stuff, and doing my own personal stuff, I've come to learn that it's actually my twin been communicating with me to a point now where when we're doing our work at Reconnections in our in-person work, she'll actually take over when I'm doing visualizations and breath work and taking people through one-on-one pieces. She'll actually, in a weird way, actually be telling me what to say, not in a word form, but it's more of a intuition, gut feeling, where a little female voice will say something and it'll come through, and then I'll just say it. So it's this connection that I cannot still explain.
There's a lot that you can't explain, and that's the great thing about, I think, all parts of the body's the human experience is such an incredible and complex, and we don't understand it, and we don't understand so much of it already, and we have no. And I think that's the good thing with how I always try and be somewhat agnostic in all areas, because it would be ignorant of me to think that we know everything, and we don't. Sure. And most of the people when I interview others, actual experts and research scientists and chemists, and they're the same. They're the first people to go, we just don't know. we just don't. We're not sure yet. Haven't got the data. Haven't tested that hypothesis. Haven't looked at something, And so it's 100%. We have no idea how a lot of things work. Pick the gut, for example. Like the gut, if you stretched out your gut wall, it would have the same surface area as a tennis court almost. It's 10 square meter sort of area, right? It's huge, right? Has more cells in our gut than we do in our entire body, right? We have it's a remarkably complex thing, and like even the experts in gut have no clue, but it informs something like 90% of our serotonin production, a lot of our dopamine production. So it actually has a direct, they're calling it the gut-brain axis now, but it's something that has such a profound impact on our whole body, the way that we utilize nutrients, and literally influences our mood and cognition and how our body's hormones work and how every single system in our body works. No clue. The experts are like, we're at like a drop in the ocean stage. We've been looking at it for 20 years. There's so much in there. We just don't even know where to start. And so I think it would be unreasonable to expect that we do know all of it. But yeah, it's just an interesting quest trying to figure out more and more, because I love that when people I can cross, and particularly since I've started looking at this stuff, I love that both informs each other so beautifully, because now I've also noticed now in a way to the ability to not have as much stress accumulate is so much better now. So before I'd only supplement, because with people I'd go with you guys, like for example, like how you laughed before, you were saying I've told you to do X, Y, Z to help sleep, right? I won't do it. I see this with a lot of people too, like with everyday people. I might cross them, and they might be, parent of 4, working a full-time job as well, have so much on their plate, right? So you give them all these lifestyle hacks to do, and unfortunately in a practical sense, they probably can't do half of them, or if they do, you take a very dedicated individual, and a lot of people have got so much they're already overwhelmed and whatever, that compliance is low, in a realistic sense. So I was saying, well, at least supplements-wise, I can guarantee they'll probably take a pill or a capsule or a powder or something, and I know at least I'm covering bases in some areas, or I know I can force something some way, or I can help something some way. And I think but interestingly, the other way it's worked is that I used to go, well, I'm stressed, so I'll just supplement for stress, right? I'll just take adaptogenic herbs, it'll help to modulate stress responses, and I'll just out-supplement the stress. Interestingly now, I think I've found a lot better ways of being more at peace throughout the day, and not having that stress, and like just being so much less stressed now since I've become aware of things. Because I was in I guess like going back to my stuff, my folks were very hardworking people, right? And so that was what they rewarded when I was younger. So it was all I ever really knew. And I always thought work ethic was a big value of mine. And I thought it was a core value. But interestingly enough, I've got my daughter's 4 as well. And I had a good friend ask me, well, if it was a value, you'd want to pass it on to your daughter, right? Yeah. So if your daughter was your age now, would you want her to be working 70, 80-hour weeks? Would you want to be to the point where you've been homeless and divorced and train wrecked many, many times, in the pursuit of work and in pursuit of career, and to the point where your social life gets sacrificed, your personal life gets sacrificed, relationships break down? Would you want that for her? Like, fuck no. It's terrible. Who the fuck would want to, why would I want a workaholic for her? Why would I want that life for her? I want to have a great life with balance and friends and family and great connections and joy and happiness, So, okay, so it's not a value then. She's like, well, it's probably a learned behavior, isn't it? So she asked me, well, what about when you were younger? Did your parents reward hard work? Well, yeah. Interesting. She's like, well, if they rewarded it back then, you've probably learned as a learned behavior that if you work hard, you'll get rewarded. Yeah. So as an adult, we carry that on ad infinitum, right? And we do it until we break, because there's no one stopping us. We don't even know it's not conscious, right? It's subconscious. So subconsciously, we're going, if we work, we'll be rewarded. We'll be given validation, respect, love from people. But there's still that, it's a hole though to fill, because the only actual validation, respect and love you wanted was from your parent figure initially. And so, you go, but so unfortunately you keep doing it in the world, but no amount of external validation or people telling you you're doing a good job or whatever would ever fill the hole until you do, right? And provide it. And since doing that, why that circles back is, since I've realized that wasn't a value, it was a learned behavior, now I give myself permission to not work as insanely hard. And when I find more peace then when I'm not. Otherwise you sit there and you feel guilty, when you're not working, or you might, it's against your value, you think it's against your value, so you used to be like, if I'm not working fucking 60-hour weeks, I'm chilling. So, get to work. And then you'd have a day off and you'd be sitting there feeling horrible and shit, and you'd just ruin the whole day. And with your partner, when I had a partner, wouldn't be present, wouldn't be a good partner either, and all that sort of stuff. And but now it informs the other one, because now I'm finding peace.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you find now that you're taking action on your current core values, like education and pieces like that, that's giving you the same reward that you were actually getting from that conditioning? Yeah, more. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because there was no reward. Because you don't get it, man. I've seen this in business. Like this is the biggest thing I've ever put together. So I guess I can't speak to bigger than myself, but I think I didn't think it would be what it is now. Put it that way, right? And I guess if now I look back, the amount of work is fucked that I've put into it. So it makes sense that it should have been rewarded, but the fulfillment wasn't there. You go, this is my goal. I want to hit this for turnover. I want to hit this for this month. I want to hit this for a sale. I want to hit this for whatever event. and you do it, and you'd be instantly like, just moving on to the next thing.
Yep.
Straight away. You wouldn't celebrate a goal. Just go, oh yeah, cool, did that. Okay, I want to hit $500,000, let's hit $1 million. Oh, I want to hit $1 million, let's go $2 million. Oh, I want to hit $2 million. And you just like, straight away, you wouldn't even sit there and celebrate the win. And it might have taken you a year to get that win. It might have taken you 6 months. It might have taken your whole work of working your face off. You might have not, like you might not have seen your partner for, the whole 6 months to do that goal. And you get it, you're like, oh, cool, what's next? And it was never that sit there and actually feel genuine fulfillment or satisfaction or joy. And it's weird now because it's a complete switching of gears to this being in this, living in this space. But it makes things so clear now. I used to feel like things were happening to me, like the world's chaos and it's coming at me. I just have to survive it, right?
Sure.
Now it's more so like, no, I'm controlling this thing. Like I'm very, very conscious of dictating this thing. So I'm like, well, now, and I didn't know what my values were. I've been quite self-aware from like a societal perspective of what our programming is and what I suppose what we're conditioned to do, right, societally. Grow up, go to school, go to uni, get a job, have a house, married, kids, house, done, right? And that's the big white picket fence type scenario. And I always went, well, that's interesting. So I'm just gonna be stuck in that 9 to 5 rat race, working for someone else my whole life, never being on my own terms, never having my own freedom. And now I went, freedom, cool. That's something that's popped up in a few areas of my life that I've enjoyed.
Sure.
And I realised that my big values were peace is number 1, freedom and growth, really big ones. Education has now come on as number 4, and then I suppose like knowledge and passing that on as well. But now I make every decision from that frame.
Yeah, nice.
And it makes so much more sense now because you're no longer confused. Before I used to be really indecisive because you'd always try and make a decision, and I'm sort of cursed with a somewhat functional brain, so it overanalyzes a lot. It's fast, right? So I tend to look at things from a lot of places, and the tricky part with that is then you can logic yourself in or out of anything. So
you can sort of get stuck in assessing, not doing.
Yes, yes, and so it's paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was a real kicker.
Yep.
Now it's so straightforward. Does this give me more peace? Does it give me more freedom? Does it give me more growth? Yes, no, otherwise.
It's
cool.
Crazy when you actually work out your core values and because when I first started, we went through them, and my core values were like drinking, partying, pokies, like all this shit. And then we went through a big breath work, and all these other values came in. And then once you start actioning those newer values, everything just changes.
It does.
And that's like now, we've just done some new ones, and educator come up for me. So being an educator, and then trying to learn more as well. So that's been a big one for me. And yeah, it's just once you start doing those core values, man, it's just everything around you just changes, and you just get a lot more focused as well.
Yeah, a lot more focused and a lot more. I suppose things settle down a bit in my head. It doesn't feel like things are happening to me anymore. And interestingly enough, as well, when you do it, when you're where you're meant to be, so are other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look at that perspective of saying so yesterday when I got my nails done, I didn't know who this chick was, and I went to a different one, and I was like, I wonder if she's good, and I was like, no, she's here for, she's coming to me for a reason. So I was like, change my perspectives on things of when I'm in situations. I was like, no, I'm meant to be here. This is happening for a reason. Instead of just being like, why the fuck am I here?
100%, man. I've had so many unusual run-ins with people and connected with people, and had so many times where I'm just meant to, like you guys, right? So before I met you, I had about 6 different, literally probably a dozen people in my circle who'd either crossed paths with you and knew of you guys, and you'd come up in conversations in different spheres of my life and so on. And, and I was, so when Rob finally rang me at East Coast and said, hey, mate, want to meet? I'm like, oh, of course. It's same sort of thing now. I'll meet people like Nerity. I'll meet people people in it's incredible. And I think the circle you attract with it when you're in this sort of area as well. I've heard this work with the whole magnetism or resonance sort of perspectives, and it's true. There's been too many coincidences that I can't explain. It's fucking crazy. The amount of people I've met where it's just been whereas now I'm just getting to that point where I'm just going, oh, of course I did. Yeah, of course you're here.
Yeah, because what you're taking action on, other people are taking action on. That's why they're being called and aligned to us in the same thing. Like Nerida, fucking get this. I don't know if I told you this yet. At the start of the week, she messages me and goes, when can you have a night off? And I was like, I thought she was about to say can we book in a breathwork session or can we do this? And I was like, I coach Monday to Thursday, so probably this Friday. Cool. 7 o'clock. I've bought you a dinner voucher for you and your partner. You got to go to Locke's Paddock, 7 o'clock.
That's a good spot.
I'm like, hang on, what? She's like, just be there. I'm like, okay, hang on, just slow down for a sec, because one of my biggest challenges is accepting and
control.
Putting my walls down and shut up, putting my walls putting my walls down and actually accepting gifts or accepting gratitude from someone or
Yeah.
accepting that type of stuff, like someone expressing something to me
hard.
instead
He
of just
turns into a
taking
little
it.
kid when you like try to express something to him. Like he doesn't know what to do. He's like, what do I do? And
Yeah.
he's just
I'm
like,
say, it's awkward, like receive, and especially like I think like in the inner child's place, I've realised as well, it's because it was never given. Like folks were just if you didn't learn how to receive compliments or
Well, yeah,
it's
just a learned practice.
It's a learned practice.
Wasn't learned.
None at all, man. Like,
Yeah.
and I think like my old man was a hard man, and so like you just didn't get compliments ever. It would be perfect, and it was like, oh yeah, But so I think you're right. I'm the same. Very hard to receive, very hard to land. But you'll just go now and just go, oh yeah, meant to happen, or I meant to be there.
It meant to be there, but the catch was in narrator. I just said, all right, I'll say yes, but you have to come. At least for entree or a drink or something. She was like, all right, sweet, easy, done. But that they're the type of people that it's like being surrounded by me at the moment because we're doing the same type of work. Like,
yeah, it's unreal.
well, it's like too, like with like all the trauma you've been through. Instead of like changing his perspective on, oh fuck, I wish that didn't happen to me. It's like, okay, that happened to me for a reason. And it's like a lesson you learn. So instead of like looking at it as like a negative thing, when you switch it to like it's like, okay, that's taught me this. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do something to change it.
Oh, they're all. I've called them band-aids recently, and there's opportunities every day to have to tear a band-aid off.
Yeah.
And some of them have been like sometimes it's breaking down a relationship you don't want to have to, firing an employee you don't want to have to. Maybe it's doing it, traveling somewhere you don't want to have to. Going, oh, do I want to do that 10-hour drive to go see that client? Do I want to do this? But it's the right thing to do. Is that in line with where you want to go? Does that give you more peace, freedom, growth? Is that going to help push your mission forward, impact more people? I got 100%. And there's always opportunities to bitch on it too. Same sort of, next week I'll be in Tamworth, for example, 4 hours each way. And that'll be an up and back on the same day, plus do a sale day, and they're usually very high energy events. You got hundreds of people you serve, and it's a big day. It'll be probably 15, 16 hours minimum. And you go, and I rang them, and even the clients are saying, "Oh, you're good, man. You've done enough of these things. You're fine. You don't have to go." And I guess I was given the opportunity to not go, and I fly out on the Monday as well, and it's in Tamworth on a long weekend, and it's on a Saturday, and blah blah blah, all sorts of shit. But you go, if you get the opportunity to have excuses all the time. But it's those times you need to prove to yourself you'll do it, and so I'll do it. And again, it's like a eat the frog type thing. Or it's like I aspire to do something hard, or it's a whatever. But there's opportunities to like do the right way, and then you'll miraculously see every time I rip a band-aid off or do something right, even if it's hard. There's like an immediate reward from the universe. Just throws something at your plate. Just put something in front of you.
100%.
Well done, mate.
Like, he was he's like, oh, we haven't really got anyone booked in for the podcast, and I was like, something's going to happen. And then he's like, message me. He's like, you're coming. And then he's like, oh, we also got this person next week. And I was like, see, I was like, we don't everything's gonna happen for us, man.
Yeah, it does, mate.
It's the same as he says it to me. Like if I'm stressing about something, he's just like, it's all good. Just something's gonna happen.
And look, it's the hardest thing to do because like going back to that, like we were speaking about before, it's quite difficult to switch off when you've got that background stress a lot of the time. If we are stressing about a certain thing, the literal chemistry of that is too, and it's literally at the brain level too. Like you were saying before, how I suppose if you want to get someone into a visualization space, right? So visualization requires prefrontal cortex, front part of the brain that's required for future planning, for visualization, for hope and prosperity and long-term planning. And, I suppose that part of the brain is where we also have our highest logic as well, and long-term prosperity and planning and things for the future, right? And long-term stuff. That's all prefrontal cortex, logic center. When we're stressed, though, we switch more to our basal brain, very old part of the brain, the amygdala, right? And the amygdala is very dependent on it. It's our survival architecture. It's older than most of our brain, and it's, I suppose, the part that is responsible for that whole, punch or run, flight or fight, survival, gut feeling, intuition, and it's like so. One of the symptom pictures of why you feel gut instinct, why you run on so much intuition and run on so much fear and run on, all those sort of heavy basal gut feelings. When you're stressed, is because you're literally using a different part of your brain. And when you guys do breath work and you're stepping them down into it, you're doing, say, box breath, for example. Well, those deep diaphragmatic moves, we stimulate. There's like the polyvagal theory. There's these nerves that run through our whole body called the vagus nerves, and they basically innervate our nervous system, and they can respond to rocking, cradling, humming, singing. They can respond to different things.
That's how sorry to cut you off, but that's how I calm myself. I've noticed. So it comes from a place of, as you know, like having young ones when we're trying to put them to sleep and we sway. So I've noticed myself whenever I'm in a stressed state and I'm standing, I'll just be like slowly swaying And it's like it's funny how you explain that. There you go.
Yeah, it's self-soothing, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's self-soothing. So like that whole, call it polyvagal theory, but essentially your vagus nerve runs through literally head to toe, and it's this massively complex nervous system, and these nerves you can stimulate through different ways. So like humming does it, singing can do it, whistling. It also you can stimulate through gently rocking. So like you look at what you do with lullaby stuff as a kid, like gently rock and sing or hum. Like it's like the perfect way to wind down a nervous system and stuff like that. Or in this way, deep breathing. Because if you breathe, accessing diaphragmatic breathing as opposed to chest breathing, because a lot of people when they're stressed, you'll notice as well, it's very shallow chest breathing.
Well,
short
that's
and
why
sharp.
we do the ice bath for our events. It's like we kind of show people like when you do have anxiety or if you feel heightened, when you get in that bath, you get that same type of feeling. So if you can slow your breath down while you're in that bath, it's like the same as when you get a bit anxious or you you just slow that breath down. And even though the problem's still there, you're still in that ice bath, but you're a lot more calmer. Like you can think a lot clearer. So that's like that's why the reason we do is just to show people like when you are feeling that way of anxiousness, you can come out, like you can calm yourself.
Yeah, well, that breathing is a very potent nervous system modulator because if you can do that deep diaphragmatic breathing, and they found this interesting looking at respiration rates on average, so the rate you breathe, right? And when you talk about box breaths, 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold, that type of thing, I guess you can be breathing. So the historical average, so I looked in the 60s, the average respiration rate, it was around about, I think it was about 7 to 9 breaths per minute, right? Which seems quite slow, actually, if you think about it, like only 7 breaths in a whole minute, right? Literally, it was like 3, 4. Now it's 15.
Yeah, wow.
People are literally panting and they don't understand.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a pant.
It's so 13 to 15 is the average now. Doubled the average respiration rate. The stresses are so much higher. Our resting heart rate's up as well. Our blood pressure's up. Our bodies, we're constantly in that background stimulus, and you see it when you might be walking on a phone call and it's like after a few steps you have to go and it's like a gasp because you literally have to catch the air because you're breathing short and shallow in your chest, not deep diaphragmatic breathing, and they're short, sharp breaths. So your breath rate's fast, but you're not actually oxygenating yourself a lot, so you can quite often get lightheaded, or when you stand up too quickly, you get a bit dizzy, and it's quite fascinating. There's all these little signs saying, hey, you're actually stressed, but they're also they're also different. So you might have in a gut setting, you'll have inflamed gut, poor bloating, poor digestion. But then if you look at maybe from the sleep space, the poor sleep, then you see during the day though, the tired but wired, the stress, the anxiety, bipolar. And unfortunately, they'll go to a GP, say I have stress, here's some medication. Cool, here's antidepressants, right? Or now there's been a 10x increase in diagnoses of ADHD in the last 12 months in the medical space. That was in the US, those statistics, but here it's significant and similar. Problem is, again, now they're saying if you're stressed, you have ADHD. It's like, well, no, you don't. You've just got a very, very busy mind because you've got a shit ton of adrenaline and cortisol floating around your system. Of course, and it's very similar. Think about ADHD. What are the symptoms of ADHD, right? Inability to focus, short attention span, can't sit still, fidget. What happens if you give someone adrenaline? If I gave you a shot of adrenaline right now, I reckon you'd look like someone with ADHD as well. 100% guarantee it, So I think, it's really interesting. They try and diagnose it, throw pills at it, but we have a bit more of we have a specialist medicine model now where it's like if you have if you're bloating, you'll go to a gastroenterologist. If you have testosterone issues, you'll go to an endocrinologist. If you go to specialists in each area, and they'll look at only from their lens. But you need to look at the body as a whole. Same as like emotional health. If you want to look at I try to look at that's now the whole person. I used to look at only the biology and look at each area and go, all right, how's your gut? How's your stress? How's your testosterone? How's your estrogen? How's your metabolism? How's all parts of you? How's your diet? How's your exercise? How's everything? But now, the thing I really adore is I can also look at, cool, now how's our patterns of behavior? How's our self-awareness? How's everything? That's the optimized human. That's it's like transcendent human being. Someone who can look at every single part of their biology and mental and headspace and patterns of behavior, subconscious patterning, conscious behavior, like all of it. You have to look at all of it because everyone looks at sections and no one talks. So if you talk to nutrition dietetics, like nutritionists won't talk to naturopath quite, or they might not talk to the GIT guy or the endocrinologist, they're all in their own little world, often their own little lanes, and no one really comes together. And that's why I like doing, I suppose, events like we're going to plan, and putting together things where we can get people in a room and let's show you guys holistic optimization.
Yep.
Optimize the physical health, optimize the mental health. Let's show you how to hit all areas of your body. And it is things like your breath work, your ice baths, getting you and showing how to modulate their own nervous system as well, but then explaining to them why is that helpful? What is your nervous system? How does that impact your body? And then, showing them some other hacks as well, like what can you do with SUPs now? What can you do with lifestyle now to make sure you can give yourself the best fighting chance to be optimized as a person to then optimize the mental health, which in turn flows on and optimizes your physical again.
Yep.
Good headspace, good body.
Yep.
Good body, good headspace. You know, so I can't wait to put one of those together.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Yeah, can't wait. So watch out for that.
Well,
That'll be a hectic
Watch out
event.
for
I
that.
could keep this conversation going forever.
Of
I
course.
kind of wish I wasn't going away for this wedding. I'd be cancelling.
Thanks for coming in, mate.
Thank you heaps for coming in.
My
It's
pleasure,
so
guys.
good. I'd love to ask you a few more questions after, but yeah, this has been great. You want to come on next week?
We can always do a part 2.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
there's so many spheres to unpack. So I'm more than happy to do a
I
part
definitely
2.
reckon our listeners are going to get a lot from this as well. So
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of questions coming your way, I'd say.
Yeah, please. Like, I think that's becoming a big part of my calling now, is understanding that before I was sort of, because I'm not much of a social media person, I've never liked it, but I've realised now I have a bit of an obligation. I think with great potential comes great obligation.
I thought you were about to say the Spider-Man quote then. I was like, say it. Say it. Say great power comes great responsibility. Hurry up. Say it.
I should have. But great potential. So I feel obliged. If someone's listening and they are like, hey, any of these things landed, I'm struggling with these areas. I'm struggling with the sleep, with the stress, with the gut, with the bloating, with the poor health, low libido, any of these things, and you want some actual information, more than happy for you to reach out, and I'll try and help you the best I can.
Where can they find you?
I guess at Instagram, Will_Prima, Prima. The Primabolics Instagram as well isn't too bad way to find me. Although probably my personal one's the easiest way, because the company ones just gets buried in DMs. But but maybe Will_Prima is probably the easiest way to catch me on Insta. And you can, if you want to organise time to try and, I don't know, book in some sort of appointment, I'd be happy to try and help people.
Sweet.
Cool. Well, yeah, this we're actually pretty far in advance in podcast, so I think this one comes out in like 2 weeks time. So it's actually the first time we've been that organised. I haven't edited and everything. They're all uploaded. It's wild.
Look at you guys go.
Yeah, I know. So guys, thank
Too
you
much
for
free time on his hands, I reckon. No.
There's no fucking free time over here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Thank you so much. And by the time this comes out next week is our reconnection event. So make sure you reach out to us if you have any questions with that and want to attend. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks to Will, and we'll see you on the next one.
Perfect.
Bye bye.
Peace. Thank
Thanks,
you.
gentlemen.